Hey, good evening, good evening, good evening, guys. This is actually my second time recording this. I guess the enemy don't want me to release this, but I decided to get back on and re-record it because what I'm gonna talk about is something that extended from yesterday that rolled over into today, and so I want to talk about fear and how we know that fear is one of the greatest hindrance, or can be one of the greatest hindrance when it comes to us being able to move forward to progress. And not just only in our personal life, but even in our professional lives, and even when it comes to our walk with God. Because I can testify, I can bear witness when it comes to the spirit of fear, and how at one point I didn't understand fear and how to confront it and how to defeat it. But I remember at one point that fear was causing certain limitations in my life. And at times it was causing me to be distorted when it came to my perception, when it came to certain things, and it kept me from walking in the fullness of my potential. And it was also keeping me from walking in the thing that God was calling me to walk in. But that's why I want to talk about fear, because first of all, we have to understand that fear is not from God. But what God began to tell me, he said, son, fear is a deception that is designed to make people believe that, one, that they're incapable, two, that they're unworthy, and three, that they're unequipped. But what God began to tell me, he said, son, the truth is, what people fear the most is often the very thing they are already prepared for, but they just don't know it. And I just want to talk to you, to be real tonight. And when God began to tell me, he said, son, fear is not just an emotion. He said, fear is belief in a negative outcome. And the Lord spoke to me, he said, son, just as faith is believing in my promises, fear is believing in what the enemy suggests. But what God began to show me, he said, I want to show you something when it comes to fear and faith. He said, both require belief. But he said, but fear focuses on destruction instead of deliverance. Can I say that one more time? He said, both require belief, but fear focuses on destruction instead of deliverance. Because faith says God is with me and I will overcome. But then fear says at the same time something bad is going to happen and I won't be able to survive. And I remember reading in the book of Job when Job said, the very thing that I fear has come upon me. But when Job said that, Job began to reveal that fear has the power to attract the very thing you're afraid of. Because I realized just as faith moves God, fear opens the door for the enemy to operate in your life. But this is the most profound and most powerful thing that God spoke to me. And God spoke to me, he said, son, fear is an exception. Fear is an expectation of defeat. But he said faith is an expectation of victory. Can I say that one more time so I can feed your spirit? Fear is an expectation of defeat. But faith is an expectation of victory. So what God is saying this evening, that he's not calling you to run from fear. He's calling you to, one, to confront it, two, to conquer it, three, to walk in victory over it. And I just want to get a quick testimony something that happened on Monday. And for y'all who don't know, I am a nursing instructor, so we instruct nursing students as they come into our school. It's this young particular lady that I've been knowing for some years now. I always knew that she was involved in the medical field and that she's a CNA. And we have what we call internal clinicals, where the students came in and they was performing vitals and they was trying to perfect it because they're getting ready to go to a facility. So we were trying to sharpen their skills so that they would be able to be prepared when they go to the clinical site. So this young lady happened to come in, and I always remembered that she had this one particular fear, and she's been carrying this fear for about 10 years. And after talking with her, she was like, this was something that I couldn't shake. And y'all, it was something simple as her mastering, trying to manually do a blood pressure. We're not talking about with the machine, but manually, by hand. And what was amazing, I mean, as long as she's been a CNA, despite her experience and her knowledge, but that was the one particular skill that intimidated her. And it intimidated her so much that for 10 years, she consistently avoided it. So on Monday, I was sitting there and I was making sure that the other students was comfortable with doing or taking manual blood pressure. And all of a sudden she walked by, and instead of coming up there to see what we was doing, I can see where she was trying to avoid it. So I turned around and I called her name, and she said, I'm getting ready to go to the restroom. So I let her went to the restroom, because right then it hit my mind, say, that's her way of escaping. Or that's the way for her to dodge this very moment. So when she came out of the bathroom, I called her over. I said, it's your turn. She didn't hesitate. She obeyed. But when she sat down, I could see the discomfort in her body language. And I can even see then that her fear had been her companion for years. Because I believe in my heart that as long as that thing was her companion, it had her believing that it was bigger than her ability to overcome this fear. So she sat there, she got comfortable, and I began to walk her through some steps. And then something began to shift as I continued to allow her to do attempts after attempt. And the more that she began to do these things, she became more confident. So what I was doing is that I was teaching her to hear the first and the last heartbeat. And all of a sudden she said, Mr. Pat, I got it. Mr. Pat, I got it. I said, continue to practice. So she continued to practice, and she continued to practice, and then she was able to look at and see the number. And not only was she able to only look at the number, but she was able to identify the heartbeat when it hit the number. So at that moment, she began to realize that she successfully defeated something that was holding her in bondage for 10 years. She looked at, and all of a sudden I was looking at her when she got up, and she was walking around, and she was walking in confidence. And I heard her talking to one of the instructors. He said, it took me 10 years to build up the courage to do this. So in other words, y'all, she got herself in a position where she was no longer running from it, but she ran to it. And when she ran to it, then she realized that she always had the ability to overcome. But it was fear that was keeping her. And I remember God speaking to me. He said, son, fear is an illusion, not a reality. He said, fear is an illusion, not a reality. And I wanted to share this story with you. But I have a question for you this evening. How many of y'all have allowed fear to convince you that you're incapable of something that God has already prepared or equipped you to do? How many times have you ran from the calling? How many times have you ran from the assignment? How many of y'all have ran from the opportunity because you have believed that you were not ready? And God began to show me all this. He said, son, what I'm trying to show you, that the enemy's greatest weapon is deception. And when God began to tell me, he said, son, if the enemy can make you feel something, he can keep you from it. Even if you already possess the ability to overcome. But that's how come when you look at 2 Timothy 1:7, for the Bible declares that for God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Isaiah 41:10 say, fear not, for I'm with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Oh yes, I will help you. And he said, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. So in other words, y'all, God never intended for us to walk in fear. In other words, he has given us the power, the love, and the soundness of mind to face every challenge that comes our way. But the question is tonight, are you willing to confront it? And as I was sitting here, God said, son, I want you to share with them when it comes to the hidden danger of avoidance. And when you define the word avoidance, it means the action of keeping away from or not doing something. And when God began to tell me, he said, son, avoidance does not make fear disappear. I'm going to say that again. God told me, he said, avoidance does not make fear disappear. But what God began to tell me, he said, son, but what happens is that it doesn't make it disappear. It only strengthens its hold. My God. For 10 years, y'all, this young lady avoided manual blood pressure reading simply because she believed that she wasn't ready. But the reality was, the longer she avoided, she allowed the spirit of fear to become bigger. And when God began to tell me, he said, son, avoidance magnifies fear because it gives it time to take root in the mind. Can I just repeat that and let that hit your spirit? And God told me, he said, son, avoidance magnifies fear because it gives it time to take root in the mind. And what God is saying, even concerning our walk with him, that when God calls us to do something, but we delay, we resist, or we run from it. And God's saying the more you delay, the more you resist, the more you run from it, you're only making room for fear to grow. Just like Moses, when you get a chance, Exodus 4:10-13. Moses said, I can't talk. I'm not eloquent in my speech. But God had to remind Moses that he had already equipped him for the task. Even when it came to Gideon, he doubted his own strength. But God had to remind him to let him know, you're doubting, but I see a mighty warrior. And even with Peter, when Peter walked on water, when he had the faith, but started sinking. And when we focus on God's power, we begin to rise. I want to talk to some people tonight. I don't want to talk to your flesh, but I want to talk to your spirit. Not only did that young lady only conquer her fear, but the only way that she conquered that fear when she took action. The knowledge she already had, but the confidence could only come through her doing. Not just her talking about it, not just about her hearing about it, but her confidence could only come through her doing. And that's why the Bible tells us in James 2:26, faith without works is dead. Hebrews 11:6, without faith, it is impossible to please God. And I begin to look at it, I say faith is an action word. And it requires stepping forward, even when fear is present. And the Lord told me, he said that faith requires stepping forward even when fear is present. God saying your breakthrough comes in your doing. I hope somebody caught that. So Prophet, you done talked about fear. So let me help you with some strategies and how to overcome fear. The first thing that we have to do is God, and this right here almost blew my mind. And God told me, he said, son, one of the things that you have to do is acknowledge the fear, but don't accept the fear. I'm going to say that again. He said, son, acknowledge the fear, but don't accept it. In other words, what God is saying, that we have to be able to identify what's holding us back. But at the same time, he said, but refuse to let it dictate your action. And God spoke something that was so profound. And God told me, he said, yes, son, fear is real. But tell the people it's not their reality. And see, one thing about fear, fear doesn't discriminate. Fear doesn't care how many tongues you speak in. The fear don't care how accurate you are when you prophesy. Fear doesn't care how many times you can run around the church. Fear doesn't care about how many times you can throw your hands up and say hallelujah. But that's what God said. Even one of the most profound prophets that even had the power to stop it from raining. But Elijah came to a place where he was running from Jezebel. Fear hit him. And he got to a point where he got discouraged. But one thing that he didn't allow it to do is to overtake him, because he had to realize the God I serve is not a God of fear, but he's a God of love, power, and he's given me the soundness of mind to finish the course. Am I talking to somebody this evening? And God spoke to me. He said one of the other ways to overcome fear is that we got to step and move forward in faith. Even when it seems like it's scary. Even when it feels afraid. Even when we can't see the way. Even when we can't feel the way. And Abraham declared in the book of Genesis, I know not where I'm going, but I know what I'm looking for. That's the type of faith that God is requiring. Abraham said, I know not where I'm going. But I know what I'm looking for. In other words, what Abraham was saying, I'm so dead to what I can see in the flesh, I can only see through the eyes of faith. My God. And God told me, he said, son, the other thing that people got to do, that they got to surround themselves around people and places that's going to encourage them. The same with that young lady. She sat down. I didn't look at the fact that she had this fear for 10 years. I was looking at the fact that we fit to get you through this thing. I'm fit to lead you. I'm fit to guide you. I'm fit to let you be your own example. That the very thing that came upon me no longer have power over me. But now that I got power over it, am I talking to somebody? Lord, we give you praise. Yes, hey God, we give you glory. And God told me, and he said something, the last thing, to be able to overcome fear. He said, practice until you master it. That's why I couldn't let that young lady get up. She might not have heard her heartbeat the first time. But I said, keep practicing. Because the more you practice, you are striving to master it. It didn't take 4 hours, it didn't take a week, it didn't take a month, but in a matter of minutes, she was able to master something that held her captive for 10 years. Am I talking to somebody? Woo, shekatabatsi. And I just want to talk to you tonight. The enemy may want you to run from your fears. But what God is saying this evening, stop running from and run to. Because he's already given you the victory. And when God began to show me in scripture, he said, son, David didn't run from Goliath. He ran towards Goliath. And when the Lord began to show me, he said, son, the difference between fear and victory is perspective. David didn't see Goliath as an obstacle. He saw him as an opportunity for God's power to be revealed. So I wanted to share this with you. The last thing that I want to say, it's time to stop running. It's time to face it. Because when you're able to face it, you will see that God has already placed everything inside of you. And the only thing that you need to do, step and move forward. Love you guys. Continue to pray for me and share this video.